Hey guys, welcome back to the channel, and today we're going to be reacting to
Why Germans don't buy houses. So you guys said that in Germany renting is more popular than buying, so let's see why.
And as I just mentioned in the intro, I even bought a house here last fall, which makes me the first one out of all of my German friends to do that, and probably even the first one who has even thought about it. Here in the US, however, I have plenty of friends my age who own their own home. I feel like it's quite normal here to buy a house, even at a younger age, instead of paying rent. And in a lot of cases, people just sell their houses again after a few years and move somewhere else, or simply upgrade to something nicer. Germany, on the other hand, is known as a nation of renters. I know that this comes as quite a surprise to most people, but more than half...
if it's like competitive market
in Germany?
Yeah, to purchase a home. Because if there's no one really out to buy a home, their only interest is mostly to rent, is there like inventory in the market to buy?
I feel like if people choose to rent instead of buying, then there should be plenty of options to buy. There should be a lot of inventory. If people choose so.
But wouldn't they be using this inventory to rent?
You can sell with a tenant. So like you can buy a home, have a tenant, and once the lease is expired, then you move in. But we'll see. Let's see what she says. Maybe there's no houses. I don't know.
All Germans actually live in a rented place, and only about 45% of Germans live in a place that they or someone else in the household own. Now,
but I feel like that's about half the country. I wonder how is it compared here in the States, though, because I feel like here is probably similar. So
I don't know.
I don't know the statistics, but
what's the asterisk?
Different surveys show different numbers from range to 42.1 to 47.5.
The reason why this is so surprising is that Germany is the country with the biggest economy in Europe and one of the biggest ones in the world. So naturally, you would think that a wealthy country like this has plenty of people that own their own real estate. But the truth is, Germany actually ranks among the last places in the developed world when it comes to
homeownership rate. Let me see if I want to see that chart real quick. Okay, Spain is number 1. Ireland, Greece, Belgium, United. Where's the States?
So Spain is top in the people own their homes?
Yeah.
Okay. That's rather interesting because your family was able to go into the market and buy.
Yeah. This is, first of all, it's old data, 2004.
Oh.
I think. It's a little blurry.
No. If it's 2004 data, it's not...
yeah. It's 1080p. Yeah. The chart is a little blurry. Aggregate home ownership ratio for selected nations. Yeah, I think 2004. So Spain is now, but where's the States? Because that's one. Oh, States is here. States is 68.7. Okay, so Germany is significantly lower than the States. Okay. Because I really wanted to see how we compare to Germany. That was like the biggest indicator. Okay.
I wonder how those numbers have changed now. I think it will decrease because here it's like very competitive to buy a home now.
I would think maybe decrease a little bit because population is growing, so probably.
Countries, only Switzerland has a lower rate than us. These numbers are a little bit older. Most of these countries don't release new numbers regularly, but it really hasn't changed all that much. Germany is still in that same rank today, so it's a helpful graphic to visualize the differences. But how does this make sense? How does a wealthy country like Germany have a lower homeownership rate than poorer countries such as Spain, Greece, or Mexico? Let's talk about it. So poor is not like no
to see the GDP for all the countries to compare to see where they stack in homeownership.
Yeah, that would be interesting.
That means there's another variable that's involved in terms of homeownership.
Well, I think it's personal choice. That's the variable. I think culturally, probably Germans just don't want to, but we'll see what she says.
Entire country owns a house. The title of this video is obviously somewhat of an exaggeration. I personally grew up in a residential neighborhood in Munich where most people did own their homes. Granted, the majority of those houses were row houses or duplexes with a rather small yard where only a thin fence is dividing you from your neighbor.
I don't know, but maybe like townhome?
Oh.
First patio and yard, but even that is already a pretty big luxury in a large German city like Munich, because we generally don't have as much space as people do here in the US, where it's standard to have a standalone house with a front yard, backyard, and your own garage or driveway. If you want to hear more about how German and American houses are different, you can check out this video, by the way. It's linked up here, but we're going to stick with home ownership versus renting today. And in Munich, which is one of the most densely populated and expensive cities in Germany, you'd have to pay a fortune to get something like what I just described as standard in the US. Even buying a 2-bedroom apartment in Munich costs more than a 5-bedroom house here in Cincinnati. But that's just a side note because...
Okay, but this is Cincinnati. We're talking about Cincinnati versus Munich. This is like comparing, I don't even know. In sports term, comparing an NBA team to like somewhere from like a third league team. Like, you know, like comparing to a Lithuanian league team. Like, come on.
But she said that the homes in Munich is more expensive. 2 bedrooms, more expensive than a 5.
2-bedroom apartment in Munich would be same as 5-bedroom house in Cincinnati.
I thought she said it's more.
I think she said about the same. More or something like that, yeah. But still, like Cincinnati, Ohio, ain't nobody trying to live in Cincinnati.
Because that's not actually the reason for the low home ownership rate in Germany. And of course, Munich and Cincinnati are two cities that you can't really compare price-wise. It's just a little glimpse into my personal reality when looking at where I'm from and where I live now and what I can afford here. But first, let's look at the facts. As I just said, the majority of all Germans live in a rental property, and that applies especially to younger and older people. According to this survey by the Deutsche Bundesbank from 2017, it's about 85% of the 25 to 34-year-olds who rent their home, 71% of the 35...
Damn, 85% people turn rent. That's a staggering number, honestly. 85%.
That's a high number.
That's a staggering number, yeah.
44-year-olds, and
at this time, those people are usually looking to buy a home, to start a family, have a family.
I would think so, especially like about like towards the 35, you know,
Yeah.
30, yeah.
52% of those over 75. So the highest homeowner rates are among the people between 45 and 74. In that age group, the homeowner rate is at 54 to 60%. So more than half of all people in that age group do own their own home, and only 40 to 46% are renters. Over the last 10 years, the homeownership rate in Germany has only slightly increased, by the way. The homeownership rate also varies within Germany and is different from state to state, with the highest rate of about 65% in the Saarland and the lowest rate of 17% in Berlin. What's interesting is that overall, there are fewer homeowners in the so-called
17%, that's crazy. So who owns it all? Companies?
new states of Germany, neue Bundesländer, so in former East Germany, than in West German states, which seems to be a remnant from the GDR. About 90% of all rental units in Germany are located in multi-family homes. That's a very common type of building that you'll see all over the country, in historical districts, in newly built neighborhoods, in the city centers, and in the suburbs. Eastern Germany is even known for a specific type of multi-family building called Plattenbau. Those buildings consist of prefabricated concrete sheets, Platten, and were mainly used to build quick and cheap housing after World War
Yeah, that looks similar to like the apartments in Lithuania, to be honest.
War II, but you'll find these buildings in other parts of Germany as well. Now let's get to the reasons as to why the homeownership rate in Germany is so low. I did mention that real estate prices in Munich are extremely high, so you might think, well, duh, houses are just a lot more expensive in Germany than in other countries, so fewer people can afford buying a house. But actually, even though in some cities, such as Munich, but also Hamburg or Frankfurt, real estate prices are indeed very high, the average house in Germany only costs around 320,000 euros. Or at least, that's the only number that I could find for a nationwide average, because the prices are usually listed per city and not for the entire country. And according
I wonder what's the average here. Honestly, I would have no idea what's the average here for the home. Yeah.
to this article,
That's like so many I don't even know if we...
Can we Google it?
Let me see. Average U.S. home price?
This is for
She said,
Munich or
no,
Germany?
the whole Germany.
Okay.
Median. Okay, we found median, I guess. 412k. So more expensive. Okay.
article by the German news outlet Focus, when you compare the average price for 1 square meter of real estate to the average household income in Germany, the rate is actually
Right, yeah, we should compare like square meter too, because
very similar to other countries. So an average household in Germany could purchase about 4 square meters of real estate with their yearly net income. That's actually the 5th best rate in the European Union. In many other countries, the average household can afford way less than that. Yes, they do own more real estate than Germans, and one reason for that is that you don't necessarily have to purchase a home to own it. You can also inherit it. And that's something that just doesn't take place quite as much in Germany. About half of all German homeowners are currently paying off a mortgage, which indicates that they bought the house themselves. While in Romania, the country with the highest home ownership rate in the world, only about 1% of owners pay off a mortgage. Why is that? Well, there simply isn't quite as much to inherit in Germany, which, of course, has historical reasons.
So you think you know Wix? Do you really? First up, we've got
50% of all German housing stock was destroyed during World War II, about 2.3 million homes. An additional 2 million were damaged, and including the refugees from the Eastern occupation zone, about 21 million people needed a home. So in the first few years after the war, West Germany needed to come up with a plan to provide a lot of housing, about 5.5 million homes to be exact, as quickly as possible. And they had to do it in the midst of a broken economy, with the currency being virtually worthless, and a population who didn't have a lot of financial needs. The best way to solve the situation was to build government-subsidized social housing in the form of apartment units that people could rent for a reasonable price. The first housing program started right after the end of the war, when there wasn't even an official state and government in place yet, but shortly after the Federal Republic of Germany was officially founded in 1949, the government did also pass the first housing law, Wohnungsbaugesetz, with the goal of having as many people as possible benefit from this. The government ended up funding about 3.3 million homes. 2.7 million were built by private investors that were given access to subsidies, low interest rates, and tax breaks, and so Germany managed to cut the housing shortage in half by 1956. And due to the fact that there wasn't really a high demand for private real estate at the time because of the financial situation, banks were hardly giving out loans, and multifamily homes could house more people. Most of those newly built homes were rentals. The foundation for Germany's preference to rent was laid. Other countries that were affected by the war, such as the United Kingdom, for example, actually had similar strategies after the war. Still, today, the home ownership rate in the UK is significantly higher, with about 65%. In 2004, it was up even more. So the big question is, why did the Germans stick with renting, even after the economy recovered and the country experienced the so-called Wirtschaftswunder in the 1950s? One of the answers seems to lie in how much money was put into rentals. Since the UK mainly targeted their housing programs at public and non-profit institutions, excluding the private sector, and kept up renting and construction cost caps for public housing developers, most rental property was of significantly lower quality than privately owned homes because landlords had to cut back in maintenance. As a result, rentals in the UK, especially those that were largely publicly funded, acquired somewhat of a stigma. In Germany, on the other hand, rental regulations were reduced much sooner, in the early 1960s, and the policies were more balanced between the private and the public sector, so that rental housing has stayed of relatively high quality in Germany and is oftentimes nicer than privately owned places in countries like Croatia, Slovakia, or Romania. Which goes to show that owning your own
countries catching strays. Okay.
a home doesn't always necessarily equal a better housing quality, and German renters seem to be very happy. According to a 2007 survey by the OECD, more than 93% of Germans said that they were satisfied with their current housing situation. One factor that probably contributes to that satisfaction is that there are a lot of regulations in place to protect tenants in Germany. This includes rent caps that limit rent increases to no more than 20% over a 3-year period. In some cities, it's even 15%. In cities with a particularly tight housing market, we also have a so-called rent price break since 2015, or rent control, Mietpreisbremse, that keeps landlords from raising rents unreasonably above the local rent index, Mietspiegel. And it turns out that rents in Germany are actually cheaper than in many other countries. A one-bedroom apartment in Germany costs about 700 euros a month on average. It's obviously going to be more expensive in a city like Munich, while the nationwide average here in the US for a one-bedroom apartment is at $1,100 US. In addition to that, leases are usually unlimited in Germany, unlike in the US where a standard lease ends after 1 year, and terminating a lease in Germany comes with quite a few rules, especially on the landlord's end. Both parties...
Really? Leases are unlimited? That's so interesting. So you just sign a lease and I guess you're assuming you're going to live there until you decide not to. That's so interesting.
Have to give a 3-month notice unless the lease agreement says otherwise, and if tenants have lived in the place for over 5 years, the landlord even has to notify them 6 or even 9 months before. Also, landlords can't terminate a lease without having a good reason. That can include the tenant being late with their payments, of course, but also when the landlord needs the place to live in it themselves or for a family. That's called Eigenbedarf. They do have to show evidence of this need though, and they can't terminate the lease when they want to sell the place. So landlords are often pretty restricted when wanting to end a lease and often have to overcome a lot of obstacles, which means that tenants don't have to worry about just being kicked out at any given time, and that provides a lot of extra security.
Now, if you don't agree with the rent increase, They can terminate the lease.
Yeah, well, not terminate, but not renew, because the usual standard term is a year. Because we have the term of, I guess you can sign it longer if you want, like, but kind of, you know, how you're gonna sign for like 5 years. You don't know if you want to stay here for 5 years. So it's in your, as a renter, best interest is all that year period is kind of like in your renter's interest too. So it's not just the landlord, but also, you know, you. So it's interesting here, being it being unlimited. I mean, I guess I don't know. It's interesting that I guess but the rate, you know, there's the cap on rent rates. So no, I guess there's nothing to worry about if there's a cap. If you can get it raised 20% at any given time, but 20%, and then the next 3 years they ain't raising nothing. So you know.
All of the upsides of renting in Germany, the German government also just doesn't provide as many incentives to buy your own home as other countries do. Even though there is a homeowner program, the KfW Wohneigentumsprogramm, that gives people who want to buy or build their own home access to low interest loans, it doesn't seem to be enough for people to buy more real estate and even out the lag in tax breaks. Because unlike other countries, Germany doesn't allow you to deduct your mortgage interest payments from your taxes, unless you rent the place out instead of living in it yourself, which then again encourages the renters market more. Also, German banks are generally a little more conservative when giving out mortgages and often require a 20% down payment, while in the UK you usually only need 5 or 10%, and in the US you can get a mortgage with a down payment as low as 3%, or in some cases even 0. At the end of the day, this just keeps the threshold of entering the real estate market a little higher than
that's because they're condos, like townhomes, because they do 20%, 25%, 30% for condos.
Yeah,
and for homes, single homes, it's like 3%, 0%.
Yeah, who knows the reason? I don't know. Could be that.
other countries, and especially excludes people with a lower income.
Like in Lithuania, it's also 20%, but I think it's 20%, but it doesn't matter condo or a home though. It's just how it is.
That's a lot.
Yeah.
What's also pretty high by international standards are the transaction costs for home purchases in Germany, which makes buying a home and especially frequent moves less attractive. Last but not least, as this article points out, the low homeownership rate in Germany probably also goes back to mentality differences. In most countries, owning your own property is a life goal for many people with a pretty high priority. George W. Bush promised his voters to make the US a homeowner society, for example, and when Brits say things like, "My home is my castle," you can tell that they idealize the idea of owning their own home as well. Meanwhile, according to the article and my personal experience, most Germans are a little more hesitant when it comes to buying real estate and taking out loans, and with the good renter conditions in the country, renting just seems like a very responsible and reasonable thing to do.
I guess maybe because buying a house is a responsibility. Renting seems like less responsibility because, especially when the term is unlimited, you decide you want to move out, you give 3-month notice or whatever, and you deuces.
I think there's also PTSD involved because at one point Germany they lost everything.
Right, if your property gonna get destroyed.
Yeah,
Oh, that's a great
point. There's no history of people having something from previous generations.
Yeah.
So oftentimes it's hard to be the first one to decide, okay, I'm gonna have this property to pass down to my future kids or family member, because that was not a thing to do. They lost the opportunity.
That's a great point. I didn't think about it, but that's a great point. Yeah, because we got everything destroyed, and I think when it got destroyed at the war, you just lost it. I don't think there was insurance.
So your attachment to stuff is different.
Okay, yeah, that's a great point. Yeah.
And that actually lines up perfectly with my personal experience. I kind of mentioned this at the beginning of the video, but I feel like buying a house in Germany is just considered a much bigger step than it is here in the US. It's more like this intimidating adult thing that younger people honestly don't really talk about a lot, even in your 20s, because it's not really a realistic option for most of us. It's something that's way down the road, or...
Yeah, I think the 20% down is a little, for young people it's tough to save 20%, because if the average... home is 320K, she said. So what, you need to save 64K just for the down, plus you need to the fees and everything. It's just a lot of fucking money.
Travel.
You probably need on average 70, 80K to just save up to put out down, and you don't want to put down all your money. You want to you put down 70, 80K. You still want to have 5, 10K in the bank, just for emergencies too. So it's realistically, you probably need 100K in your savings.
And then
to
also your maintenance, you still have to live.
Right? Yeah. If shit goes south, I
It's
guess.
a lot of money.
Yeah.
Might never be reality for us. Now, of course, I grew up in a big, expensive city. This is definitely a little bit different in rural areas, but I think it's safe to say that buying a house is just a big decision and a big step for Germans, and I experienced the different reactions when I bought my house last year. While most of my American friends were simply excited for me, many of my German friends looked at it as this huge milestone and couldn't even believe that I was able to do this, and how easy the process was here. Americans really make this whole house purchasing process seem like the most casual, everyday activity. My realtor even told me that she never had a client that asked as many questions as I did, even though from a German perspective, I really just did what everyone who's about to make a big decision like this should do. But she said that most of her clients usually just want her to handle everything and don't really care to understand all of the details themselves. And the signing of the final purchasing contract took me like 15 minutes. In Germany, I know from my parents that usually takes over an hour because they'll read the entire contract to you. Here, they just summarize the contract for me and have me sign the different pages. I also feel like even for Germans who could technically afford it, buying a house isn't even on the table usually until they're sure that they want to stay at that place for a long time, and until then, they rent. You wouldn't really buy a house.
Yeah, here you don't have to stay, put it on the market, sell it, and you don't worry about it. Like, buying a house doesn't mean, oh, I'm committed to stay here for 5 years. No, you can literally buy, change your mind 5 months later and sell it. Yeah, the market is pretty good to, you can sell a house, I think, without a problem.
House in Germany when you already know that you're going to move again in a few years. Buying a house is something much more permanent to us. In general, Germans only move 4 to 5 times in their lives, while Americans move more than 11 times on average. With the yearly leases here in the
I wonder where she pulled that statistic from. That's interesting.
US, especially younger people often choose to move every year instead of extending their lease, and even for families, it's normal to move every now and then, and as I said earlier, just sell your house and buy a new one. So to answer the question of the video, the reasons as to why Germany has a lower home ownership rate than most other developed countries in the world are a combination of the country's history and rebuilding process after World War II, the high quality of rental housing, relatively low rents, the high renters protection, low incentives for homeowners, and probably a little bit of our mentality. If you want to read more about this topic, I linked all of my sources and articles that I use for my research in the info box below. Now I would like to hear your experience.
I guess yes, that's it.
Guys, of course, let us know your thoughts. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Join the Discord, and as always, share as much kindness as possible.